The massive ship floated in the darkness of space like a metal mountain. It was called the Eternal Accord, and it was bigger than anything humans had ever built. The ship belonged to the Galactic Coalition, a group of alien species that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Humans had joined this group only 12 years ago, and to the aliens, they were still bobbies learning to walk. Park stood near the back wall of the main meeting room. He was 63 years old, with gray hair and a face full of small lines that came from years of hard living. He wore a simple gray suit, nothing special, nothing fancy. He looked like someone's grandfather, maybe a retired teacher or a shop owner. Nobody looking at him would guess what he really was. But under that plain suit, his body told a different story. Old scars covered his skin like a map of pain. 30 years he had served in the United States Marine Corps. He had fought in 4 different wars in 4 different places. He had 2 Purple Hearts, medals given to soldiers who bleed for their country. He had a Silver Star too for bravery, but he never talked about that. He never talked about any of it. His daughter, Park, was the reason he was here. She was 35 years old, smart as anyone he had ever known, and she worked as a junior ambassador for Earth. She had asked him to come on this mission as a military advisor. The truth was, she just wanted her father close. These negotiations were important and she was nervous. The meeting was about trade routes. Specifically, it was about hyperspace lanes, the invisible roads that ships used to travel faster than light. Earth needed access to certain lanes controlled by a species called the. Without these lanes, human ships would take years to reach important parts of the galaxy. With them, the journey took only days. They were not friendly. They stood on the other side of the room, 7 of them, tall and frightening. They looked like insects that had grown to the size of men and then kept growing. Their bodies were covered in hard shells that shone like oil on water, showing colors of purple and green when the light hit them. Their heads had large eyes made of hundreds of tiny parts, like the eyes of flies but much bigger. Their mouths were not mouths at all but hard pieces that clicked together when they talked. They believed they were the greatest military power in the entire coalition. Maybe they were right. They had huge fleets of warships and armies that had conquered many worlds. They looked at humans the way a grown man might look at a child playing with toy soldiers. Fleet Commander was their leader. He was taller than the others, his shell darker, almost black. When he moved, the other moved away to give him space. When he spoke, everyone listened. He had been staring at the human group since they arrived, and his eyes showed nothing but disgust. "So few of you," said. His voice was strange, like rocks grinding together, and so fragile, I could break any of you with one hand. Stepped forward. She was small compared to the aliens, but her voice was steady. "We are here to discuss trade agreements, Commander, not to compare physical strength." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Of course, humans always want to talk. It is all you are good for." The negotiations began, and they went badly from the start. Every time or another human made a suggestion, dismissed it. He did not even pretend to consider their words. He would wave his long arm and say things like unacceptable or ridiculous or simply no. His assistants would click their mouth parts in what seemed like laughter. Watched all of this in silence. He stood still as a statue, his hands behind his back, his eyes missing nothing. He saw how enjoyed making the humans uncomfortable. He saw how the other looked at their commander with fear and respect. He saw how his daughter's shoulders grew with each insult. But he did not speak, not yet. During a break in the talks, the humans gathered in a small room to drink water and catch their breath. Sat down heavily in a chair and rubbed her eyes. "He is not even trying to negotiate," she said. "He just wants to humiliate us." A man named another diplomat nodded his head. "They have never respected humans. They think we are weak because we only recently discovered space travel." "We are weak compared to them," said a woman named Shin. She was a scientist who understood alien technology. "Their ships are faster. Their weapons are stronger. They have been fighting wars in space for 10,000 years. Looked at her father. You have been very quiet. What do you think? Considered the question. He had spent his whole life reading people, understanding enemies, finding weaknesses. Even aliens, he was learning, were not so different. The commander is not just rude, said slowly. He is performing. He wants his people to see him dominate us. This is about pride, not trade. So what do we do? Asked. We wait, we stay calm. Men like him, they get bored when they do not get a reaction. Eventually, he will make a mistake. The talks continued for 2 more days. Grew more aggressive. He started talking about human history, about the wars that humans had fought against each other. He seemed to know a lot about Earth's past, and he used this knowledge like a weapon. Your species spent thousands of years killing each other, he announced to the room. You fought over small pieces of land, over different beliefs, over the color of your skin. He spread his arms wide. You are children who never stopped fighting in the playground. You understand nothing of true warfare, nothing of honor, nothing of what it means to be a warrior. The human diplomats stayed quiet. They had been trained to ignore insults, to keep their faces blank, to remember that the mission was more important than their feelings. But saw something else in his eyes. The commander was not satisfied. He wanted more. He wanted someone to fight back so he could crush them. And slowly, his attention began to focus on. It made sense. Was the only human who never showed any expression at all. He never looked away from, but he never looked angry either. He was like a wall of stone, and this seemed to bother the commander greatly. On the evening of the second day, stopped in the middle of a sentence and pointed directly at. You, he said, the old one who hides in corners like a shadow. I have been watching you. You never speak. You never move. Are you sick? Are you sleeping with your eyes open? What purpose do you serve? The room became very quiet. Spoke quickly. He is my father. He serves as a military advisor to our delegation. His eyes seemed to shine with sudden interest. All his attention focused on like a laser beam. Military, the word came out like an insult. This old, dried-up creature, this bag of bones, he looks like he would fall over in a strong wind. Said nothing, his face showed nothing. But inside, in the quiet place where he kept 30 years of war, something stirred. Not anger, something colder, something patient, something that had learned to wait in jungles and deserts and burning cities. He had met men like before. Different faces, different species, but the same hunger for dominance, the same need to make others feel small. And he knew, with the certainty of a man who had survived what no one should survive, that commander had finally made the mistake they were waiting for. The alien just did not know it yet. The third day of negotiations started worse than the others. Commander arrived late. He made the humans wait for almost an hour, standing in the cold metal room with nothing to do but look at each other. When he finally came through the doors, he did not apologize. He simply walked to his seat and began talking as if nothing had happened. But his eyes kept moving too. The old Marine had taken the same position as always, near the back wall, hands behind his back. He had not moved when made them wait. He had not complained. He had simply stood there like he could stand there forever, like time meant nothing to him. This seemed to make angry in a way that the commander did not fully understand. The morning talks were about shipping fees and insurance for cargo. Boring topics but important ones. Handled most of the speaking for the human side. She was good at her job, careful with her words, always polite even when was not. But the commander was not interested in shipping fees today. During a pause in the discussion, stood up from his chair. He was so tall that his head nearly touched the ceiling. The other in the room went very still, watching their leader with careful eyes. I want to know more about humans, announced. He began walking slowly around the room. I want to understand what kind of species we are dealing with. You say you want equal partnership in the coalition. You say you deserve respect, but what have you done to earn it? Started to answer, but held up his hand to stop her. Not you, little ambassador. I have heard enough of your careful words. He turned his body toward. I want to hear from the military advisor, the man who watches everything and says nothing. Tell me, old human, what has your species ever done that deserves our respect? Looked at the commander with calm eyes. We have survived. Survived, made the clicking sound that meant laughter among his kind. Like rats survive, like insects survive. Survival is not an achievement, it is the lowest form of existence. Perhaps, said, his voice was quiet but clear, but we are still here. Crossed the room in 5 long steps. He moved fast for such a large creature. Now he stood directly in front of, so close that the old man could see his own reflection in those compound eyes. The other humans in the room tensed, half rose from his chair. Shin's hand moved toward the emergency button on her belt. His face went pale with worry, but did not move. He did not step back. He simply looked up at the alien who towered over him and waited. You called yourself a military advisor, said. His breath smelled like copper and chemicals. You must have been a soldier once. Tell me, human soldier, what do you know about war? What do you know about killing? Some things, replied. Some things, repeated the words with disgust. I will tell you about war, old man. I have commanded fleets of 200 ships. I have led armies of 50,000 warriors. My campaigns have stretched across 3 sectors of this galaxy. He leaned down, his face inches from us. The other watched with cold amusement. This was entertainment for them, watching their commander break another human. I have personally killed more than 200 enemies of the Dominion, continued. His voice was proud, boasting. I have crushed rebellions on 12 worlds. I have burned cities. I have brought entire species to their knees and watched them beg for mercy that I did not give. He waited for a reaction, fear, anger, something. Gave him nothing. 200, the old Marine said quietly, just the number, no expression, no judgment. Blinked, which was strange because his eyes were not made for blinking. The response confused him. He had expected the human to be impressed or frightened or defensive. Not this. Not calm repetition of a number. Yes, 200, snapped. More than any human has ever killed, I am certain. Your species is too soft, too weak. You probably give medals to soldiers who kill 5 or 10 enemies. The room was silent. Everyone was watching now. Tell me, old man, said, his voice dripping with contempt. In your entire career as a soldier, how many enemies did you kill? 1, 2. Did you ever even hold a weapon, or did you spend your service behind a desk, pushing papers and pretending to be a warrior? Was quiet for a moment. His eyes looked past the walls of the ship, past everything. He was seeing something else, somewhere else, some other time. I was not behind a desk, he said finally. Then where were you? Playing soldier in some training camp, practicing with fake weapons against targets that do not shoot back. No. Then what? His patience was ending. He wanted to break this human to see fear or shame in those strange flat eyes. What great battles did you fight? What enemies did you defeat? Give me a number, old man. Tell me your kills. The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Wanted to speak, to intervene, to protect her father, but something held her back. Some instinct told her that this moment was important, that whatever happened next would change everything. Looked at Commander, really looked at him, and the alien saw something in those human eyes that he did not understand, something that made a cold feeling move through his body, though he could not say why. We did not count, said. His mouth parts clicked together in confusion. What do you mean you did not count? Every warrior counts. It is how we measure our worth. In my first war, I was 23 years old. We fought in a city called. Do you know what street fighting is, Commander? House to house, room to room, sometimes so close you can see the enemy's eyes before one of you dies. His voice was still quiet, but something had changed in it. The other humans felt it. Even they felt it, though they did not know what it meant. After they sent me to a place called Kandahar, mountains and dust and enemies who hid in caves and came out at night, we lost good people there, friends, brothers. This is not answering my question, said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. You asked for a number. I am telling you why there is no number. Eyes finally focused on again. When you are carrying what is left of your best friend in a piece of cloth because there is not enough of him left to carry any other way, you stop counting. The room was completely silent now. When you are holding a boy of 19 who is crying for his mother while his blood runs out between your fingers and you know there is nothing you can do, you stop counting. Did not move, did not speak. When you make decisions in the dark, fast decisions, life and death decisions, and sometimes those decisions are wrong and people die who should not have died, who were not enemies at all, you stop counting. Because if you count, you have to remember each one. And some of us already remember too many. His voice did not break, his face did not change, but somehow that made it worse. This was not a man showing weakness. This was a man showing a wound so deep that it had become part of him, like a bone that healed wrong and never stopped hurting. Your 200 kills, said. You say that number with pride, like it makes you strong, like it makes you a great warrior. He shook his head slowly. I pray that you never understand why I cannot say my number. I pray that you never carry what I carry. 3 seconds passed. The longest 3 seconds that anyone in that room had ever experienced. And then the room fell silent in a different way, not the silence of people waiting to speak, the silence of people who had nothing left to say. Nobody moved. Commander stood frozen in front of like a statue made of dark shell and confused thoughts. His compound eyes, which had shown nothing but contempt for 3 days, now held something else, something he had not felt in a very long time. The other in the room were equally still. They had come here expecting to watch their leader humiliate another weak human. Instead, they had witnessed something they did not fully understand. The old man had not fought back with fists or weapons or angry words. He had simply told the truth, and somehow that truth had stopped their commander cold. Watched her father with tears building in her eyes. In 35 years of life, she had never heard him speak about his time in the military. Never. When she was young, she had asked questions the way children do. Where did you go, Daddy? What did you do? Did you ever shoot a bad guy? He would always smile, a sad smile that she did not understand back then, and change the subject. Eventually, she stopped asking. She learned that some doors in her father's mind were locked, and he had thrown away the keys on purpose. Now she understood why. The silence in the room stretched on, 10 seconds, 20. Nobody wanted to be the first to speak. Nobody knew what to say. Finally moved. He stepped back from just one step, but it meant something. In culture, stepping back was an admission. It meant the other person had ground that you could not take. You speak of things I do not know, said. His voice was different now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like confusion. The do not fight the way you describe. Our wars are clean. We use ships and long-range weapons. We do not. We do not hold our enemies while they die. Then you are lucky, said. There was no anger in his words, no judgment, just a simple statement of fact. Lucky, his mouth parts clicked softly. I have never thought of it that way. I have always believed that distant killing was civilized, superior. Maybe it is, shrugged his shoulders slightly. I do not know, I only know what I did, what I saw, what I cannot forget. One of the other, a female with a lighter-colored shell, spoke up. Her name was Officer, and she served as second in command. Commander, she said carefully, the negotiations. Held up his hand to silence her. His eyes never left. Your wars, the commander said slowly, they were fought on your own planet, between humans. Yes. You killed your own species. Yes, and this does not shame you. Considered the question. It was a fair one. He had asked himself the same thing many times in the dark hours of the night when sleep would not come. War is always shameful, he said. Even when it is necessary, even when you have no choice. Every time a person kills another person, something breaks inside them, something that cannot be fixed. We just learn to live with the broken parts. Was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was very soft. To have a word. In our language it is. It does not translate well to your human speech. The closest meaning is one who has walked through death so many times that death walks beside them like a friend. The other made soft clicking sounds. The word clearly meant something important to them. We give this title only to our greatest warriors, continued. Those who have seen the worst of war and did not break. Those who carry their battles inside them and still manage to function, to live, to breathe. It is the highest honor a soldier can receive. He looked at with new eyes, not the eyes of a conqueror looking at a victim, the eyes of one soldier looking at another. I have met 3 in my entire life. They were all old like you. They all had that same look in their eyes, that same. Wait. I do not need your titles or your honors, said quietly. No, you do not. That is what makes you worthy of them. The tension in the room began to change. It did not disappear completely, but it transformed into something else. The delegates were looking at the humans differently now, not with respect exactly, but with curiosity, with interest. Wiped her eyes quickly and stepped forward. She was a diplomat, and she recognized an opportunity when she saw one. Commander, she said, perhaps we could take a break, resume the negotiations tomorrow with fresh perspectives. Nodded slowly. Yes, that would be acceptable. The filed out of the room in silence. At the door, paused and looked back at one more time. I was wrong about your species, he said. I thought humans were soft because you were new to space. I thought your wars on Earth were primitive because they were fought with small weapons over small pieces of land. He paused. I understand now that I was measuring the wrong things. Then he was gone. The human stood alone in the empty room. For a moment, nobody spoke, then let out a long breath. What just happened? He asked. I think, Shin said slowly, the negotiations just got a lot more interesting. Walked to her father's side. She wanted to hug him, to hold him, to somehow take away some of the pain she had heard in his words. But she knew better. Some pain could not be shared. Some weight could not be lifted. Are you okay? She asked softly. Looked at his daughter. For just a moment his mask slipped, and she saw the tired, wounded man underneath. The man who had been carrying ghosts for 40 years and would carry them until he died. I am fine, he said. The mask was back. Go get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. Dad. His voice was gentle but firm. The mission comes first. It always comes first. That is what we do. That is what we have always done. She nodded, even though she did not want to. Even though she wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all, at the price her father had paid for his country and his people, a price that nobody ever talked about, that no parade or medal could ever repay. I love you, she said. I love you too. He smiled, a small smile, and for just a second he was not a warrior or an advisor or a marine. He was just her dad. Now go, let me have a few minutes alone. The other humans left the room one by one. When reached the door, she looked back. Her father had not moved. He stood in the same position, hands behind his back, staring at nothing. But she could see his shoulders shaking slightly. She closed the door and left him to his memories, to the names and faces that never left him, to the weight that he had carried for so long that he no longer knew how to put it down. And in the darkness of that empty room, surrounded by stars that humans had only recently learned to reach, Park finally let himself feel what he had been holding back for 3 days, for 40 years. He did not cry. He had forgotten how to cry a long time ago. But he remembered. That was his curse. That was the price of survival. He remembered every single one. The next morning came slowly. Had not slept. He never slept well after talking about the past. The memories came too easily then, sliding through the cracks in the walls he had built inside his mind. He spent the night sitting by the window of his small room, watching the stars drift past, wondering if any of those distant lights shone on worlds that had known war the way Earth had known war. He doubted it. The aliens he had met in 12 years of space travel all seemed shocked by human history. They fought wars too, but different kinds of wars. Cleaner wars. Wars where enemies died far away, turned into numbers on screens, never close enough to look you in the eye. Perhaps they were the lucky ones. Or perhaps thought they were missing something important, something that could only be learned in the blood and dirt, something about the value of life that you only understood when you held it in your hands and watched it slip away. The morning meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock, arrived early as he always did. To his surprise, Commander was already there. The big alien stood alone in the conference room, looking out the main window at the stars. His posture was different than before. The arrogance that had seemed built into his body was gone. He stood like someone carrying a heavy weight, though could not see what that weight might be. "You are early," said without turning around. "So are you." "I could not sleep." The alien's voice was quiet, strange. "Do humans sleep? I know so little about your biology." "We sleep, some of us more than others." Finally turned. His compound eyes reflected the starlight in 1,000 tiny points. "I did not sleep either. I have been thinking about what you said." Waited. He had learned long ago that silence was often more powerful than words. "In culture, we celebrate our kills," said slowly. "We count them, we display them. The more enemies you kill, the more respect you receive, the more honor." "I understand. Many human cultures were the same once." "Were the same, no longer." Walked to the window and stood beside the alien. Side by side, the difference in their size was obvious. Was nearly 8 feet tall, with arms that could tear a human apart. Was just an old man, gray and tired and unremarkable. But somehow, standing there in the starlight, they looked like equals. "We still honor our warriors," said. "We still respect those who fight for their people. But we have learned, slowly and painfully, that killing is not something to celebrate. It is something to survive." That is a strange way to think about war. Perhaps, or perhaps it is the only sane way. Was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice held something that sounded almost like shame. "I told you I had killed 200 enemies. I said this with pride as a boast." He paused. "Last night I tried to remember their faces. I could not remember a single one. They were just targets, points of light on a screen that I made disappear." "That is how you were trained to think of them." "Yes, and I never questioned it, until yesterday." His mouth parts clicked softly. "You remember all of yours, do you not?" Did not answer. He did not need to. "After you left the room yesterday, I used our ship's computer to research human military history," continued. "I read about your wars. Kandahar, the places you mentioned. I saw images, videos, records of what happened there. Those records do not show everything." "No, I imagine they show very little." Turned to face directly. "I read about something called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, a condition that human soldiers develop after seeing too much war, nightmares, flashbacks, difficulty living normal lives." His face showed nothing. "I know what PTSD is. The do not have this condition, or we did not think we did. Now I wonder if we simply do not recognize it, if we have been too far from our wars to feel their weight." The door opened and other delegates began entering the room. Arrived with the human team, her eyes immediately finding her father. She looked worried. She had clearly not slept much either. "We will continue this conversation later," said quietly. Then he raised his voice to address the room. "Welcome, please take your seats. We have much to discuss." The negotiations that day were completely different. Listened when the human spoke. He asked questions, real questions, not the mocking challenges of the previous days. When his subordinates tried to dismiss human proposals, a single look from the commander silenced them. By midday, they had made more progress than the entire previous 3 days combined. During a break, officer approached. The female had stayed quiet during most of the talks, observing everything with her sharp compound eyes. "Your father said he is not a diplomat." "No, he is a retired Marine." "Marine, this is a type of soldier." "Yes, some would say the best type, others would argue," smiled slightly. "My father never argues about it. He says the best soldiers are the ones nobody talks about." Considered this. Among the soldiers who survive many battles are treated as heroes. They are given positions of power and comfort. They never have to fight again. It is similar for humans, though, hesitated. Though not all of them want positions of power, some just want to be left alone. "Your father is one of these." "Yes, he spent years after retiring just sitting in his house, going for walks, watching television. I think he was trying to remember how to be a normal person again." "And did he succeed?" Looked across the room at her father, who was drinking water and studying the star charts on the wall. Even now, she could see him analyzing the room, noting the exits, tracking the movement of everyone around him. Old habits that would never die. "I do not know," she admitted. "I do not think he knows either." The afternoon session went even better than the morning. By the end of the day, they had outlined the basic terms of a trade agreement. Humanity would get access to the hyperspace lanes they needed. In return, they would share certain technologies and resources. But more important than the trade terms was the change in atmosphere. They were not friendly exactly, but they were no longer hostile. They spoke to the humans as equals or something close to it. As the day ended and delegates began to leave, Commander approached one final time. "I have been thinking," the alien said, "about why you came on this mission." "I came because my daughter asked me to." "Yes, but also because you believed you might be useful, that your experience might somehow help. Every soldier hopes their experience means something, that the price they paid bought something valuable." Nodded slowly, a gesture he had learned from watching humans. "I commanded from far away. I gave orders that ended lives I never saw. I thought this made me powerful, strong." He paused. "Now I think perhaps it just made me ignorant." "You are not ignorant," said. "You simply fought different wars. There is no single way to be a soldier. But there are different weights that soldiers carry, and yours is heavier than mine." Looked at the old human with something very close to respect. "I do not know if I envy you or pity you, perhaps both. Do not waste your time on either. Just learn from it if you can." "Learn what?" Considered the question for a long moment before answering. "Learn that the cost of war is never just resources or territory or political power. The real cost is paid by the people who fight, and they keep paying long after the shooting stops. Forever, sometimes." Was silent. "If your people learn that lesson," continued, "if they really understand it, then maybe you will think twice before starting the next war. Maybe you will try harder to find another way." "Is that what humans learned from your wars?" Smiled sadly. "We are still learning. We are slow learners, but we are trying." The alien commander nodded again. Then, slowly, he extended his arm toward in the gesture of respect that the humans had learned to recognize. "You are a worthy enemy," said. "I hope we never have to be enemies." Reached out and touched the alien's arm with his own hand. "So do I," he said. "So do I." The final day of negotiations arrived with a strange feeling in the air. Everyone in the human delegation knew that something important had happened over the past few days. The mission had come to Earth expecting failure, or at best a weak agreement that gave the most of what they wanted. Instead, they were about to sign a deal that treated humanity as a true partner in the Galactic Coalition. And it had all changed, because an old man told the truth about war. The signing ceremony took place in the main chamber of the Eternal Accord. Representatives from both sides gathered around a large table made of some kind of blue metal that glowed softly from within. Documents had been prepared in both human and languages, checked and double-checked by translators and lawyers and diplomats. Commander stood at one end of the table, stood at the other, had tried to stay in the background but had insisted that he stand near the front. "This agreement exists because of you," the commander had said. "You should be present when it is completed." Had wanted to argue, but his daughter's eyes had told him to accept. So he stood there, uncomfortable in the attention, wishing he was back in his small room watching the stars. The speeches were long and formal, as speeches at such events always were. Spoke about the future of cooperation between the Dominion and Earth. Spoke about the importance of understanding between species. Other delegates said similar things in different words. Finally, the documents were signed. Hands were shaken, or in the case of the arms were touched in their gesture of respect. The ceremony was over, but was not finished. "Before we leave this chamber," he announced, "I wish to say something more, something personal, something that is not part of any official record." The room went quiet. The other looked surprised. Personal statements were not part of their culture, especially not in front of outsiders. "When I came to these negotiations," continued, "I believed that humans were weak, primitive, a young species that had stumbled into space by accident and did not deserve to stand among the great powers of the galaxy." He paused, his compound eyes moving across the room until they found. "I was wrong." The words hung in the air. Several shifted uncomfortably. This kind of admission was almost unheard of from a commander of rank. "I was wrong because I was measuring strength by the wrong standards. I counted ships and weapons and kill numbers. I looked at humanity's short history in space and saw nothing impressive." Began walking slowly around the table as he spoke. "But I did not look at humanity's history on Earth, the wars you fought, the prices you paid, the scars you carry, not just on your bodies, but inside your minds. I did not understand that the greatest measure of a warrior is not how many enemies they kill, but how much weight they can carry and still keep walking." He stopped in front of. "This man," said, "taught me something that all my years of military service never did. He taught me that honor is not about victory. It is about surviving what cannot be survived. It is about carrying what cannot be carried. It is about remembering what would be easier to forget." Stood very still. He did not like this attention. He did not want to be held up as an example of anything. He was just a man who had done terrible things and was trying to live with the memory of them. But he saw the faces of the other humans in the room, and he understood something important. This was not just about him. This was about all of them, all the soldiers who had ever fought and died and been forgotten, all the men and women who came home broken and spent the rest of their lives trying to put themselves back together. If his pain could mean something, could help humanity earn respect among the stars, then maybe it was worth it. Maybe it was all worth it. "They have decided," continued, "that humans are not weak. You are different. You are forged in fires that we have never known. You carry weights that we have never lifted, and that makes you valuable allies." He raised his voice so everyone could hear. "From this day forward, let it be known that the Dominion considers humanity to be a species that has walked through death and emerged still standing. We honor your past, we respect your present, and we look forward to your future among the stars." The delegates began making a sound, a rhythmic clicking that built in volume and intensity. The humans did not understand at first, but then leaned toward. "It is applause," she whispered, "the highest form of recognition we can give." The human delegates began clapping in response. For a moment, the two sounds mixed together, alien and human, clicking and clapping, filling the chamber with a strange and beautiful noise. And in the middle of it all, stood quietly, his eyes wet but his face calm. He had never wanted recognition. He had never wanted honors or titles or respect. He had just wanted to do his job and go home and forget. But perhaps forgetting was not the answer. Perhaps remembering and helping others to remember was the only way to make the pain mean something. After the ceremony, the human delegation prepared to return to their ship. Goodbyes were exchanged. Promises were made to meet again. The atmosphere was warm in a way that would have seemed impossible just a few days ago. Found her father standing alone by a window, looking out at the stars. "You did it," she said. "You changed everything." "I did not do anything. I just told the truth." The truth is powerful. I spend my whole life trying to find ways to say things that will make people agree with each other. And you just talked about real things, about what really matters. Turned to look at his daughter. For the first time in a long time, his eyes seemed lighter, not happy exactly, but peaceful. "When I was young," he said, "I thought being a Marine was about being strong, about being tough, about never showing weakness. And now I know that real strength is not about hiding your pain. It is about carrying it openly, about letting others see what war really costs, so maybe they will think twice before starting the next one." Put her hand on her father's arm. "I wish you had told me before about what you went through. I was trying to protect you. I did not want you to know how ugly the world could be. I know now." "Yes," he smiled sadly, "but maybe that is okay. Maybe it is important for everyone to know, so we never forget, so we never stop trying to be better." They stood together in silence, father and daughter, watching the stars drift past. In a few hours, they would board their ship and return to Earth, would go back to his quiet house and his quiet life. He would still have nightmares. He would still remember every face, every name, every moment of horror from 40 years of service. But now, finally, that pain had a purpose. His suffering had helped his species earn respect among the stars. His memories had changed the way an entire alien race thought about war. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Dad said softly, "Yes, I am proud of you, not for being a Marine, not for fighting in wars, for being brave enough to talk about it, for carrying all that weight and still being the kind man who raised me." Felt something loosen in his chest, a knot that had been tied tight for decades, finally beginning to unravel. "Thank you," he whispered. They stayed by the window until it was time to leave, not talking, just being together. A father and daughter, a veteran and a diplomat, two humans among the stars, carrying the weight of their species' history and hoping that someday that weight would help build something better. Something worth all the pain. Something worth remembering.